Hana was the calmest person in every room she walked into. Colleagues said it like a compliment. Nothing rattles her. What they didn't know was that 2 nights a week, alone in her car in the parking garage, she would sit with the engine off for 10 extra minutes, not checking her phone, not going anywhere, just breathing, trying to understand why a meeting that should have meant nothing had left her hands shaking. She didn't know what the feeling was. She only knew it kept coming back. One evening, instead of waiting for it to pass, she did something different. She stayed with it. She asked it one question, not, "Why is this happening to me?" but "What is this exactly?" And underneath the irritation, she found something she hadn't expected. Not anger at her colleague. Grief. Old, specific, and not about the meeting at all. This is where every transformation Carl Jung ever described actually begins. Not in therapy, not in a breakthrough, but in the 3 seconds before you explain a feeling away. He called it the start of individuation, the slow process of becoming a person instead of a reaction. Self-observation doesn't ask you to fix anything. It only asks you to stay long enough to see what's actually there. Hana never figured out, that night, exactly what the grief belonged to. But she would. 3 chapters from now, it would have a name. Marcus was, by every account, the easiest person at the company to work with. Nothing offended him. Nothing seemed to land. Deadlines moved. Credit got stolen. Plans fell apart. And Marcus laughed it off every time. The same line on repeat. "No worries, man." People liked working near him because he made stress disappear. What none of them clocked was that Marcus had said some version of "no worries" almost daily for 11 years, and had not, in that time, told a single person what actually worried him. One night, a friend pushed past the script. "No, seriously, what do you actually feel right now?" Marcus opened his mouth to deliver the line. And instead, for the first time in over a decade, nothing came out. Jung called this the persona, the face built for survival. Useful, even necessary. Until the day you realize you can't remember the last time anyone met the one underneath it. What Marcus didn't say that night, the real reason "no worries" became his entire personality at age 19, is a story for later. For now, all you need to know is this: the mask doesn't fall off in one night. It cracks first. Adiz answered every call, every message, every favor. People called her reliable. She had started, secretly, to hear it as a sentence. You exist to be useful. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday. A friend asked her to drive 40 minutes to help move furniture, the third such request that month, and Adiz, exhausted, typed 4 words she had never typed before. "I can't this time." She sent it before she could stop herself, then sat frozen, certain the friendship was over. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. "No worries. Good luck this week." That was it. No anger. No distance. Just nothing. The catastrophe she had braced for her entire adult life simply didn't happen. What collapsed instead was a belief she didn't know she'd been carrying. If I stop giving, I stop being loved. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with hinges. And Adiz had just discovered hers had never actually been locked, only never tested. She would test it again soon. Much harder. With someone who wouldn't say "no worries" back. Before anyone knew his name, a young programmer spent close to a year doing almost nothing visible. No networking. No pitching. Most days, he didn't leave a small room in his parents' house, where he sat alone redrawing the same circuit boards, again and again, with no one watching and no deadline forcing him forward. People who knew him worried. Asterisk, is he avoiding life? He wasn't avoiding anything. He was doing the one thing almost no one does anymore, giving silence enough time to say something back. Jung drew a sharp line between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the ache of wanting company you don't have. Solitude is choosing the quiet on purpose, long enough that something underneath the noise finally has room to speak. What that young man built in that small, quiet room would eventually sit on desks in millions of homes. But that's not really the point of this chapter. The point is smaller, And it's for you. What have you never let yourself hear? Because you've never given it 10 consecutive minutes of silence to say it? You're about to need an answer. Because the next door doesn't open with quiet. It opens with something most people spend their whole lives running from. Hana came back to it on a Sunday. The grief from chapter 1. She had promised herself she'd sit with it properly, and this time, instead of stopping at "I don't know," she let herself keep going. She remembered being 9 years old, bringing home a drawing she was proud of, and watching her mother glance at it for less than 2 seconds before turning back to the dishes. Not cruel, not even unkind, just absent. A nothing that, repeated enough times across enough years, becomes a belief. What I make doesn't matter unless someone bigger approves it. In the meeting that had wrecked her 2 chapters ago, a colleague had taken credit for her idea in front of everyone, and no one had reacted. No one had even noticed. It wasn't really about the meeting. It was a 9-year-old girl, standing in a kitchen, holding a drawing no one looked at twice, finally getting witnessed 30 years too late. Jung called this the shadow, not the evil part of you, despite the name, but the part exiled so early and so thoroughly that you forgot you were the one who sent it away. We don't get rid of our shadow by ignoring it. We just lose the ability to see it pulling the strings. There's a reason this hits harder than it should. Neuroscience backs up exactly what Jung intuited a century earlier. A wound encoded young, before language fully exists, doesn't get stored as a memory, it gets stored as a body state. The amygdala remembers what the conscious mind has long forgotten. That's why a grown woman with a strong career can be reduced to 9 years old by a stranger's indifference in a Tuesday meeting, and have absolutely no idea why. Hana didn't fix anything that Sunday. She just finally knew what she was crying about. And knowing, Jung believed, is the only door that actually opens. This is the part of Marcus's story he has told almost no one. When Marcus was 8, his father left for what was supposed to be a 2-week work trip. He came back 4 years later, a stranger who tried, badly, to act like a parent again. In between, an 8-year-old boy learned the only lesson that mattered. If you need something from someone, they leave. If you need nothing, you're safe. By 19, no worries wasn't a personality. It was a survival strategy that had simply worked so well, for so long, that everyone, including Marcus, mistook it for who he was. The night his friend finally asked, "What do you actually feel right now?" and nothing came out. That wasn't Marcus being difficult. That was an 8-year-old, finally being asked a question he'd spent 30 years making sure no one would think to ask. Jung called these frozen fragments complexes, emotional knots that reactivate, fully intact, decades later, the instant something brushes against them. They are not weakness. They are old wounds that never got the chance to finish healing, because no one ever looked directly at them. The way through isn't to force the feeling out. It's to ask, gently, how old does this actually feel? Marcus, eventually, answered that question for the first time in his life. He said, 8. And something in him, finally, started to grow up. Here is the part of this journey almost no one wants to hear. Both Hana and Marcus had spent decades being praised for the very thing that was quietly costing them everything. Hana's calm, Marcus's ease. The qualities that made them easy to love were the qualities built entirely out of fear. Jung believed urgency, the constant need to be doing, achieving, moving, is almost never about the present moment. It's an old fear wearing a fast pair of shoes. There's an old story about a student who begged his teacher for the fastest path to wisdom. The teacher poured him tea and kept pouring, even as it overflowed across the table and onto the floor. Your mind is already too full to receive anything. Asterisk, the teacher said. Asterisk, you're asking for speed. It's the speed that's in your way. Hana and Marcus, in their own lives, had been pouring an already full cup for years. Careers, routines, relationships, never once stopping long enough to notice the table was soaked. This is the part of the story where most self-help content tells you to simply slow down. as if it were a setting you could switch. It isn't. You cannot out-discipline a nervous system trained, since childhood, to associate stillness with danger. What you can do is what Hana and Marcus were both about to do, in different ways, in the same week, without knowing the other existed. They were about to stop running toward the thing they were afraid of losing, and start asking what, exactly, they'd been so afraid to lose in the first place. Marcus had been trying to fix a failing project for 3 years, controlling every meeting, every email, sleeping 4 hours a night, certain that if he just gripped tighter, the thing would finally hold together. It didn't. The harder he gripped, the faster it came apart, clients leaving, his own team quietly burning out under him. Jung returned again and again to the image of a river. Most of us spend our lives swimming against a current we've convinced ourselves we have to fight, certain that without our constant effort, everything collapses. The week after Marcus finally said the word "aid" out loud to a friend, something in him loosened that had nothing directly to do with the project. He stopped controlling every detail. Not out of surrender, out of something closer to trust. 3 months later, an opportunity arrived that he could never have engineered by force. A former client, mentioning his name to someone else, entirely outside his control. Letting go was never about giving up the goal. It was about giving up the 8-year-old's belief that the only way to keep something is to grip it until your hands bleed. A film student, call him Theo, wanted nothing more than to make documentaries. Real ones. The kind that mattered. For 4 years, he made none. Every time he picked up a camera, the same paralyzing question arrived. Who will watch this, and what will they think? His professor finally said something that should have insulted him and instead set him free. If you're afraid to make a good film, make the worst one you possibly can. The next morning, Theo filmed 3 unremarkable minutes of a flower seller on a street corner. No lighting. No script. Nothing impressive. Insight changes nothing if it stays on the page. Jung was clear about this. Fear never leaves before you act. It dissolves during the act, never a moment before. Hana, that same week, finally told her manager, calmly, without apology, what had actually happened in that meeting months earlier. It didn't go perfectly. There was an awkward silence. But she said it. 3 trembling minutes of footage. For trembling sentences in an office. Neither was impressive. Both were the exact moment 3 separate people stopped waiting to feel ready. There's a version of this story where Hana never changes, because nothing around her ever does either. That almost happened. Her workplace had a particular flavor of culture. Ambition quietly punished, vulnerability mocked as weakness, that made every fragile new habit she was building feel ridiculous the moment she walked through the door each morning. Jung believed we don't only absorb our personal history. We absorb the emotional atmosphere of whoever surrounds us. A room built on cynicism makes growth look naive. Hana didn't quit in a dramatic scene. She simply started looking, quietly, for months, for a team where the things she was learning to do wouldn't be undone by 9 a.m. every day. When she found one, 6 months later, a friend told her she seemed like a different person. She wasn't. She had just finally found soil that could hold what she was trying to grow. If you've ever felt chronically smaller around certain people, certain rooms, certain jobs, it might not be a flaw in you. It might be exactly this. Marcus, a year into all of this, said something that surprised even him. I used to tell people my dad leaving made me independent, strong, low maintenance. Now I think it just made me terrified of needing anyone. The facts of his childhood hadn't changed. The story he was telling about them had. Jung believed we are shaped less by what happened to us, and more by the meaning we keep assigning to it, on repeat, for years, often without noticing we're doing it at all. I am someone people leave, and I am someone who learned early to take care of himself, are built from the exact same 8-year-old's afternoon. Only one of them keeps you safe. Only the other one lets you actually be loved. You cannot edit the chapters already written. But, and this is the part almost no one tells you in time, You are holding the pen for every single page that comes next, whether you've noticed yet or not. Here is what neither Hana nor Marcus knew, walking into all of this. Every single door, the watching, the mask, the boundary, the silence, the shadow, the old wound, the slowing, the letting go, the trembling first step, the right soil, the rewritten story, was never 12 separate destinations. It was one long hallway, and at the end of it is not a better version of either of them. It's simply them, the part that was there the whole time, underneath the calm, underneath the no worries, waiting very patiently to stop being managed and start being lived. Jung called it the self, not the mask, not the wound, the steady center that doesn't disappear when the fear does. It was just buried under it the whole time. Living from the self doesn't mean the fear stops coming. It means it stops being the one who answers the door. Hana, a year later, sat alone on a Sunday, the same kind of quiet that once nearly broke her, and asked herself one question, with nothing to perform and no one watching. If none of it mattered, what anyone thought, what I was supposed to be, who would I actually be right now? She didn't get a dramatic answer. She got a quiet one. And for the first time and longer than she could remember, the quiet didn't feel like something to escape.